당가서 대상 줄랑전마 어두성가서 로즈로 침버스 로를 갈래갈래지네 도슨루거스 말바.
So we've been very slowly going over this text, The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, by the great master Atisha.
어제 다드는 아주 다른 아주 되네. 아주 그걸로 되네 매일로 된 자와치부 도니와르스 매일로 된 시라고 누바치부를 자와치부를 매일 생한테 시라고 동보를 짱보를 안에 매일 생한테게 안에 주에내서도 주바이나 누바치부와르스.
So at this moment we have the human basis, which has many abilities and many powers. We possess the human mind that is very intelligent and very clever and can do so many things. So it's because of this basis and the mind that we possess, we're able to ascertain the nature of religion or the nature of Dharma if we choose to do so.
수수 도완도가 나지 세제 강가기 도완도고 말해 수수 동에만 도와 나지 안에 세제 용조기 동행도고 말해스.
And like ourselves, all sentient beings wish to have happiness because we ourselves desire to have happiness. We can assume, or it's safe to say, that others desire the same thing. Likewise, all sentient beings wish to be free from suffering. So we need to think along these lines.
어제 다드네 먹이 상로 다 가서 그래. 다 가서 저와셔마를 내손을 지는 안되네 되게만도 안에 내가 내손그 동에 가네 하다면 대상 투나 냐비 상로그 리지 용거스. 어때서 가서 매 다시 제토그레스. 제부 종도 토모이 나지를 맞아야 드레스.
So if we look at the rebirth in future lives, there is a potential to have rebirth into the lower realms. And when we recognize that we dislike this or desire to be free from lower birth in the lower realms, such as the hell birth, hungry ghost, or animal realm, if we achieve the realization that wishes to definitely be free from those lower realms, then we have achieved the first lineage of realization, or the teachings that are shared in common with the small capacity or small scope.
that day no dental had the military saji talk na jawdu and the land debal shadan.
So what is the method to be able to eradicate the lower realms and to achieve rebirth into the higher realms of human beings, gods and demigods and so forth? What is the method? The method is to have a firm basis of refuge as well as an understanding of the law of cause and effect, or karma and its results, and the way to modify our behavior as well as purify negativities through confession.
어제 다든 렘바 니바가 상로 렘바 니바들 당에 송고 동엘 타나야 아니 메당 데미가드 할 제바이네 아니 지 동에 가이 동에 치 동에 차반 주식 동에 두서 유회장 아니 두서야 포드 템베요 말에 대달랭 해반 주행에 좀 상바 디 토네 아니 동에 대바다 군주 대바니 봉자 고된달라데 냐즈라자 다유고네 는 가르주 그래 라니 tabal triage tojude and jibun ding on the tumu larger than.
So the second lineage called the medium scope, or teachings that are shared in common with beings of a medium capacity, recognizes the suffering of the lower realms and wishes to abandon those, but also recognizes that being born as a god or as a human or as a demigod is also unstable. And then they recognize, that type of practitioner recognizes that beings in the higher realms still have to experience the three types of suffering: the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, and the pervasive compounded suffering. And then that type of being wishes to renounce or definitely get out of cyclic existence altogether after recognizing the pervasive suffering throughout all six realms, and then wishes to achieve liberation for his or herself alone. So this type of motivation, wishing to achieve liberation for oneself alone, is called the medium scope, or teachings that are shared in common with beings of medium capacity.
어제 다 가서 녀모바다 안내 도게 보내 타발 치아 타주디 what is this?
I forgot one thing. So then this practitioner wishes to abandon the first of the two noble truths, which is the truth of suffering and the truth of origin. So a medium scope practitioner desires to abandon those two truths and then take on or practice the second of the two noble truths, which is the truth of path and the truth of cessation. So the practitioner engages in the truth of path to lead up to the cessation. So then this type of practitioner must eradicate the karma and afflictions that lead to cyclical rebirth, and then has to practice a method which will lead him or her to liberation. Okay, I got it all.
어제 다 집은 되게 가지고 그래. 나로 집 타바투 나냐면 상로마도 신신 당지 상로요 말이스. 다 집은 전부 되게 아니 나로 동에 만들어 봐 있어서는 신신 당지 동에 되고 말이야. 신신 당지 동에 매봐 쇼나냐베 hinjidan senjen tangje ne senjen tangje jibu shona nyabe shamba gombi to ne senje gongwa ji sonu gores.
So then this type of liberation is a liberation that is for oneself alone. There is no object of observation or no thought of others in this particular scope or in this particular capacity. But when we move to the great scope or the teachings for beings of great capacity, we'll see that these beings recognize that like themselves, all other sentient beings have to experience suffering. Then those sentient beings become the object of observation for that practitioner's love and compassion, which eventually will produce mind generation, or the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So that type of practitioner uses sentient beings suffering and so forth, and the desire to relieve that suffering as his or her object of observation, and then utilizes the thoughts of love and compassion to lead up to mind generation, which is a synonymous, translator's note, with bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to enlightenment.
다 되네 상주가 센스게 들 지다가 편집으로 센자치부르스 번나가서 딩상 잠을리게 뭐 안에 현다진 두서게 안지 예차다 된다고 도네 아버라가 먼저부터 술 로버지야 제가 도왔어 안에 뭐가 지소이나 시다 가부도왔어 센 어떤다고 로버지야 등아수 시다가 나주 때바 이나 지소이나 지야가 시다가 야부도왔어.
So we can see that this mind that aspires to enlightenment is a very great mind. It is a very vast mind. And recently, the singer, many singers have gotten together yesterday to do a concert to relieve starvation in Africa. And if we can, we should really rejoice in the efforts that these performers have made in order to relieve the suffering of others.
안에 자가다 싱가포르 가서 되네 인도네시아도 술래 최준이 제겐서 맞고 로버 제겐도 왔어. 어디서 가서 내주도 가서 돈도 가서 생 집도 왔어.
So also there have been the people who have joined together to help the tsunami victims in India and Indonesia and all of the places that were affected by this. And if we think about the good that has been created, then maybe we can make our minds more pleasant when we think of the good that has been done.
And
this is a very positive mind, and it's very good to think of these things.
안에 senjen taji doalung goya da donge meba zoyage nezu di ongres den soza tamnge sanje gundo nyabe sanludle teba chembi senje sagris.
So when we speak of great vehicle mind generation is a mind that is very vast. This is a mind that desires or wishes to free all sentient beings from all types of suffering and lead all sentient beings to a state of happiness. And the way that this practitioner goes about doing this is wishes to become a Buddha very quickly, so that he or she can then understand how to truly bring these sentient beings to a state of happiness, and how to truly bring these sentient beings to a state that is free from suffering. So this is the reason that the great vehicle practitioner wishes to become a Buddha.
我的想出生命上路的了，新鲜堂姐的上路的有送上，俺提把钱不是，提把钱不是了我的是，三家钱不是，三家钱不一张，俺那提把钱不，三天什么都没张，啊基本真，三的来穷啊一张，基本穷是，我三个那时候都用的意思的。
So it's because this mind is focused on all sentient beings, and because all sentient beings are vast, that this mind or this bodhicitta falls into the category of the great vehicle tradition. Great meaning vast because of the focus of the mind itself. And then the reason that the other scopes are called medium and small is because the mind itself has a smaller amount of scope, or a smaller scope, as you move down the levels of the scopes. So the medium scope has a smaller scope, or is not quite as vast as the great scope, but the small scope is even less vast than the medium scope. So this refers to the motivation or the mental state of the practitioner in each of the scopes.
我的老人给大的那么三节就等那么来往对了，短大那么短三那么你在我的时候，上就的三节吧，三节的上当呀，俺那学把了好比去，俺那上就的三节呢，特别前面上就的三节的介绍说呢，但那上就上把这个新州娘来接的是四十不八句，
Right.
但那初你所以那个初当也是个初的老句，
Lesser.
我的老人我们得来的我是。
So here, when we've arrived at the part of the text in the lamp for the path to enlighten, the part of the lamp for the path to enlightenment, where it talks about two things. One, how to generate the mind of bodhicitta, how this mind is actually generated, and then what one engages in or what one does once the mind has been generated, such as practicing the six perfections and so forth. Because it's necessary to have both accumulations to achieve the final goal. The accumulation of wisdom and the accumulation of merit, or collection of wisdom and collection of merit. So it's necessary for this practitioner to accumulate these two things in order to become Buddhas. So the next part of the text deals with gaining bodhicitta, and once one has it, what he or she does.
上主个山举了接车吧，呢，上主个山举了接吧，咱就上街多搞了搞不是，上主个山举了接呢，俺那所有那当一些出了，举人不老过是的。
So if one hasn't produced the causal factors for this mind generation, or for the mind that aspires to enlightenment, then it would be very difficult to achieve the states of Buddhahood or enlightenment. But once this mind generation has taken place, then it becomes very easy to accumulate the collections of wisdom and merit.
我等于说让大家个准备上去就都常见的，该把长面送都出啥噻，军人不习不进来，所以那当一些个出啥的常见有的是，等那人俺说要隔离就我等的常见过了嘛都，上去个山公把常见浪上常见多隔离考不是。
So we can see that the great conqueror, the destroyer, Shakyamuni Buddha, accumulated these two collections for 3 countless eons. So we can see that he took quite a long time to gain these collections. Likewise, we have to try to slowly engage in this path and gain these collections ourselves. And if we do practice, we can achieve the same result that Shakyamuni Buddha did.
我这大上就山路上被吹的啦。 俺那盘山路上被吹到，就山上就山的了，盘山的就山你嘛都有嘛的是，盘比山，盘山的就山你有啊的是，俺那盘山当就山，盘山这个的搞的是呢，上就山距离接不接，上就山被东巴马都被高接，上就个山的了，盘比山是个的是，盘浪大把长嘛多，俺那上就山被东巴满长，盘山是了我的是。 大上就山被就了，上就山被东巴的介绍说呢，在那种的就山的是就山。
So when we look at the mind that aspires to enlightenment, or bodhicitta, we can see that there are two categories of bodhicitta, or mind generation, or mind that aspires to enlightenment. Those two categories being aspiring mind bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. Aspiring bodhicitta is the type of bodhicitta that is produced initially. It's more of a wishing or more of an aspiration at that point, but it is still nominally designated or named bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to enlightenment. Once that has been produced, and then the practitioner takes a bodhisattva vow, and that bodhisattva vow, as stated before, is coupled with the mind that aspires to enlightenment, then that bodhicitta becomes engaged bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta, which has a lack of a bodhisattva vow, is called aspiring bodhicitta or wishing bodhicitta. And the bodhicitta, which has the bodhisattva vow, is called engaged bodhicitta. So this is the difference between the two types of bodhicitta, or mind that aspires to enlightenment.
다 랑드는 담보 현생 로장비 추들해드그레스 현생 현비생 로장비 추들란 사진남 된생남 송레스 뭐 뭐지 조스 안에 조아지 뭐지지 조스 사지 송레드그레스
네, the sache sumje sum, the dunda gare.
다 사지 송들에서 현생 줄 제발라 안에 초모 싸우고라마도 초모 마사나 현재 줄지야 갈래 커버스 분한가서 신칼 찾아봐이나 어느 신가들지 사당 르당 초당 좀 뭐지 마초나 안에 제도도 제도도 왔어 어느 신가를 초당 사당 르도 야버지 조여나 안에 들렌데다와이나 안에 모두다와이나 야버지도 왔어 그때 나지 현재 줄지발이야 담보 안에 신칼 안에 사주 르즈 주수 상고바 나지 초사고 그래서 초사의 가르스나 안는 아주 주든 아주 된된데 사면래들 사면래 샤세와도 최지샤바도 제수에는 그 로와 주제다가 타지주 상주체 몽스 현생 마지 현생 제야 그 타수 안네 연락되바 냐소래야 개치버리스 담부 조아드레스
Lessa. Nipa.
다 니바 상주세 고아들어 래 담부 조아들로잖아.
Okay. So initially in the text, the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, Atisha, I almost said Aliyah, Atisha deals with the aspirational bodhicitta, or the aspirational mind that aspires to enlightenment. And there are three sections which follow that. First, the necessity of accumulation. And the reason for this is if one wishes to plant rice, it's necessary to have a fertile field that has been watered and that has grass, and that has the dirt and so forth that will actually produce a sprout. If one plants a rice seed in an infertile field or a field that doesn't have water and so forth, then that seed will not produce a sprout. But if all of those factors are present, the water and the dirt and the fertilizer and so forth, then once one plants a seed, then that seed will come to a sprout. Likewise, if one hasn't accumulated certain amounts of merit, or the accumulations is what the literal translation, if one hasn't accumulated, then the ground is not fertile enough for the bodhicitta to be produced. So here there is a focus on the seven-limb prayer and engaging in the practices of offering and prostration and confession and so forth in order to accumulate, which will then help to produce a fertile field for the mind that aspires to enlightenment to be generated and to be strengthened.
What this is that 개체버스 단단데 아디샤게 존델로 손도와스 데네 사제게 잠부셔비 mellanco 손요와레스 쉔조로 손요와레스 안는 하게 주가 주디지 주가도 나로래 안네 걸 상연래면서 배제요 말이스 상연래도 배지 있는가 쳐버스 개쳐버스 대인손상 안는 가서 아마라가게 남이 주주 탄지게 된 잡은 나로래 상연래서 매사못 왔어 어디 집었던 것 쪽에 그 내가 접은 인생 어디 주주주 뇌할 때 지워스
In the initial stages, the seven-limb prayer is very important. There isn't a part of Buddhism that we can't find the seven-limb prayer in. For instance, in the sutras, in the great vehicle and lesser vehicle, in the tantric teachings, we will find the seven-limb prayer is in all of these. And when we go to different centers and so forth, and we look at different places where they practice Buddhism, we won't be able to find somewhere that doesn't use this seven-limb prayer as well. So it's because of this, it's said that the seven-limb prayer is very powerful and very important.
당아수드네 아리사남 찾아와 있는 예마까지 사자 글로 추주 건가 나로로데 사면랜도스 다자자다 자나바다 도수 추주 나올 가른 데도 그는 가서 자기 세고 말스 된노로 사면랜노고나 비지 여지르스
So if we look at the four lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, the Gelugpa, the Sakya, the Kagyu, and the Nyingma, we'll find that all of these traditions utilize the seven-limb prayer. And if we go to a Chinese temple, we can't really read Chinese, so it's tough to say whether it's there, but we should assume that it probably is, even though we can't read Chinese. So when they hit the wooden stick on the, I'm not really familiar, they hit the, I don't know what it's called, but it's called something. It's an instrument they hit in the Chinese temples. It goes, maybe they're chanting the Heart Sutra or another prayer. I don't know what they're doing, what they're chanting. Do you? So this is very good, I think.
And Sanjil Santan, Sanjil Shasewa, Chobambiwa, Yola Dubatin Santan, Digre, and then Jambe Yanda, Chenrezig, Dramantan, Mercy Buddha, what the Sule, Yola Dubi, Tune, and Tusa de Karajin, Chi Marjibaris.
So, in the initial stages, to produce this aspiration or aspirational mind that aspires to enlightenment, the door to it is the practice of the seven-limb prayer. And when we look at, or we think about what our object of observation will be for the seven-limb prayer, we can use such things as the entire merit field, or we can use the Buddha Shakyamuni, or we can use other objects of observation such as Manjushri, or Tara, or Medicine Buddha, or any of the other deities. We can make this seven-limb prayer too. So we look to make it to holy objects.
What the Susu combat the Tamazu, and then Chobat and Sayan.
So if we can, in our own individual houses, if we have these objects or not, we can clean the place very well, and then we can sit down and then do a seven-limb prayer.
What the nigga then Dashan Juga sends and then San Louis between the Shasewa, Shasek in a pension that is, Shasewa, Luigi Sha, Magi Sha, Iji Sha Song Yuaris, Luigi Sha Tanangazun want to say at the Rova, Hanishi be shot down, Doanishi be shot, Shase between you somewheres.
So, when we're making the first part of the seven-limb, we're making an offering of the first part of the seven-limb prayer, which is homage or prostration. It's very good if we can combine this actual act with the mind that aspires to enlightenment, or to think about the mind that aspires to enlightenment while we're doing these. And then when we make prostrations, there are three types of prostration. There is physical prostration, verbal prostration, and mental prostration. And then within the physical prostration, that can be divided into tantric prostration and Vinayak prostration, or prostration of the Vinaya. So we're beginning with the physical prostration. It's when we physically put our hands together and then put them at various places on our body and then bow, touching the floor and getting up. So this is what is meant by the physical prostration.
That's among us Shajan Duzi. Then Oji, Rambaji Songji, then the second Duzi and Tasung Tena Kazatun Divorce.
Then so the Vinayak prostration begins with putting the hands together with the thumbs inside and then touching the three places on the body, the crown, the throat, and the heart, and then going to the floor and touching the five parts of the body, the forehead, the two hands, and the knees, and then getting up very quickly. So this is what's called the Vinayak physical homage, or physical prostration.
The shot said it the ransom ya long goes, then the Jews. Get the Teshaman Nasuna than Jiba in a Julia town.
So there is an auspicious reason for getting up very quickly from a prostration. And this reason is that in future lives we'll be able to very quickly get out of the lower realms. So this is the auspicious reason that we get up very quickly after we have touched the parts of our body to the floor.
다 하게 샤자들이 지바지 데스모 지바지 zubi rinpoche 샤사야 드리스.
And then the tantric prostration involves the same hand gestures of putting the thumb in the hand and touching the crown, the throat, and the heart. But then one places the entire body and stretches the entire body lengthwise out on the ground, retracts the arms, and then gets up very quickly. So this is the tantric prostration.
다 르지 샤사와 다 상제라 소 다달라 대바 여바이나 안에 zubu 근두 구구 제바인 샤 르지 샤르는 그랬어.
But if one has appropriate faith in the Buddha and just bows down with their body, then this could also be called physical prostration or physical homage.
다 나게 샤데 배저와 샤자 두발라 샤셀로 샤서 나한도야데 나게 샤라 그랬어. 난 샤세와 상제라 샤셀로 출라 샤셀로.
Right. So when we're making a verbal prostration, this is just saying out loud, I prostrate to the Buddha, the great conqueror, the destroyer. It's actually saying out loud that one is paying homage or making a verbal prostration. So it's a verbal gesture of homage.
이지고는 샤세와 다 이지고는 그바 대바 그바들 이지 샤인지로다.
So mental prostration is when one has faith and pays homage through thought mentally to these objects.
어제 다 샤세도 아버지 중화 있나더네 아니 zubu 그 사이오데 온제세지 사절라 마도버도 사기 뒤기 나다냐비 콜로지 야비게 저와지 콜로지 잡을 지하가 레사그를 송요르스.
So it has been stated that when one makes a physical prostration, the amount of atoms that are covered on the ground beneath the body are the same number of times that one will be able to be born as a chakra king or a leader of the worlds.
어제 다 가술 잡을 샤세기나 잡을지 레사그도스. So if
in the future we want to be born as kings, then it would make sense for us to make as many prostrations as possible so we can achieve that result. And it's very beneficial. So the next of the seven limb prayer is the limb of offering. And we can make offerings of flowers or of water or of anything that we would wish to or desire to offer. It's appropriate. So if we can make an offering of food and drinks, we have to have food and so forth at breakfast time. We have to have it at lunchtime. We have to have it at dinner time. So it'd be very good if we can make offerings at all of these meals whenever we eat or drink.
Sama chaba deshibi naba meba sama cha nada shin to jewa shus gonju sun to sanji ma chaba yin zang gonju sun choba meba denya de ne phyen sanji ma chaba res phyen che bu wares.
So it has been stated that because of the excellent qualities that the three jewels possess, they are the most appropriate and powerful objects of observation or objects for us to make offerings to. Because of their excellent qualities, because of their vast qualities. So it's very good for us to make offerings to the three jewels of the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel. But it's also appropriate for us to imagine that in the space in front of us, that the space is filled with flowers and various different kinds of offerings. So these can be imagined offerings also. So this is the limb of offering.
디바 모모사 잡아도 그걸로 디바도 그가도 거서 요 말인데 되게 사변도 가서 생각을 내는 거です. 저와 도마면 다디바도 사자비 그와단다 대요 말데 그와그 사변데 대두와레스. 그와그 사변을 대와 용그레스. 디비 용그레스. 디비 사변을 동해 용그레스. 디비 사변을 동해 용고여다 동해 안에 가서 소지기 동해 되고 말레스. 동해 먼저 봐 인다 안에 디발을 샤나지야 계주그레스.
So the third limb is called the limb of confession, or the limb of acknowledgement. I like that better, limb of acknowledgement. So this particular limb is necessary because since beginningless time, we have engaged in various misdeeds, and we have engaged in various virtuous activities. Both of these have left seeds within our mental continuum. The misdeeds that we have placed within our mental continuum as seeds will produce suffering if they have not been purified. The seeds of virtue will produce happiness. So because we do not wish to have suffering, it's necessary for us to figure out how we can get rid of the seeds of the misdeeds which will produce suffering. So one way in which we can get rid of these seeds which will produce unpleasant results is through acknowledgement or through confession. So that's why it's important for us to do this particular limb, because an unpurified seed of a misdeed will always produce suffering.
대답이 이제 디바들 동에 용고요 알았어. 동에 제가 누가 요르데 누가도 매바줘야 다시 상지고 송버레스. 녀부 도지 통고 샤나 제기나 디바가 누가 간데지 첩이 이내 매바줘 두고레스. 안에 추제단 되나 처음에봐 나야 디바 인식 안마마고스 상지게 녀부 도지 상소나 디바 첩이 간데지 이내 다 두고레스. 저는 샤나 제기나 다 두고레. 동에 용고 말에 송요레스.
Less so these seeds have the ability or the potential within them, these negative seeds, to produce suffering. But the Buddha has stated that there is a way to purify these seeds so that they do not produce suffering. The Buddha has stated and is quoted as saying that whatever sins have been committed, even the 5 heinous crimes, can be purified through the 4 opponent powers. So one of the practices of purification is called the 4 opponent powers. And it's been stated by Buddha that any type of negativity can be purified, even the 5 heinous crimes, which are killing one's mother, killing one's father, killing an arhat, drawing blood from a Buddha, or dividing the Sangha.
어제 도저 선거는 샤나 제기나 디바 다그레스 상지 송버레스 디바 다비페 고볼로두게 시비티 거서 앙굴레 말라로서 몸무 송버레스 디바 다게.
And not only did the Buddha state that all forms of negativity can be purified, we'll also find in the great master Nagarjuna's letter to a friend where it's stated that Angumala engaged in those negativities and was able to purify them and achieve arhatship. And there's many different examples of beings who have purified their misdeeds.
We can
also find examples in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa and Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand by the great master Pobunka Rinpoche. We can find all of these examples in these texts as well, Tibetan texts as well.
Deva dabi paganders na ngaso ore deva dabi ta kariyo ares kares na nyalang lo yongres nyalang chasung go na nakha lama nakha thorang so go ba chasung ba dele an zob debe yin ba ji nasa me ba yin an ji khala bi da bu sa ya regon za ya ta le shun ya o den de nyalang tang ba yin na ane nyalang ya se yong du sen jibun do na deva ta go ares
the nanka drowa
nakal roa na chu jawa na ane ji lama dan je ya na o den de nyama shawa la so ba o den de nyala zam ba ne ni ya se on du sen jibun do na deba ta go ares.
So how does one know if a purification has taken place? What are the signs? So there are various signs that can happen during dreams. If in the last state of dream, one experiences flying in the sky, or eating good food, or having good drinks, or the sun shining very brightly, or mounting an elephant, or mounting a horse, or being on the top of a mountain, or just having a general good feeling when one wakes up, or seeing lamas, teachers, monks, nuns, and so forth. These are signs in the dream state that a purification has taken place. So if we take a seed and plant it, then it has the potential to produce a sprout. But if we take that same exact seed and we burn it with fire, then it no longer has the potential to produce a sprout. Likewise, when we apply the four opponent powers to our negativities, or to our negative seeds, then these seeds within our mental continuum no longer have the power or potential to produce the result of suffering either. So the fourth limb is called the limb of rejoicing. And we can rejoice in the good of all practitioners of the lesser vehicle, whether it here or solitary realizers, rejoicing in all the good of the great vehicle practitioners, rejoicing in all the good that monks and nuns have done, rejoicing in all the good that ordinary beings have engaged in, rejoicing in all the good that superiors have done, rejoicing in our own good. So we can make this limb of rejoicing very powerful. So if we can meditate on joy, or finding joy in other religions good, then this is also very good, very beneficial. So we can see that there are Christian and Hindu and Jewish temples around, and they also do very good things, so we can rejoice in their good. So it's because they wish to have happiness that they engage in their religion.
And the Sanjay Susi Tama Sadula, Hua the Jabal Manabares, and Majubal Navares, and the Jabu Kandayinas, Jabu Kota Java Danish unit, and the Susi Naburos, and the Churung Hua the Majubal Naso Kandayinas, and the Sanjay Churung Najesha, Naje the Gay, and the God the Machun Dosons. And the Majuba del Jesuit on Juni, Majuba the Sona Chosons, then is was on Moa to College.
So there is a story of a woman who made an offering to a hearer practitioner. She didn't have anything to offer, and she had leprosy. So she had wanted to make a soup to offer to this hearer practitioner. And she had nothing to offer, and she put her fingers into the soup and they fell off. And normally this would produce a rebirth into a hell realm, because you would be giving a holy being these leprosy fingers and they would get sick. But the hearer practitioner went ahead and drank it, and when this woman passed away, she was born into the God's realms and didn't have to experience a hell realm rebirth because of her motivation. And then after hearing this, a great king in the land decided to make a very big offering ceremony for Buddha and all of his attendants and all of the monks and nuns and bodhisattvas and so forth. After hearing that this woman was able to just make an offering of her fingers, which had leprosy, to a hearer. He imagined that he would have great results by making great offerings to these holy beings. So he made a great feast, and at the time, during this feast, when it was taking place, there was a poor beggar in the alleyway who was rejoicing in all of this great thing that was going on, all of these offerings that were taking place. And then when the time for the aspiration or the dedication of the meal came, the Buddha dedicated all the merit that was created from the meal to the poor beggar in the alleyway. And then the king asked, why in the world would you say his name and not my name? I am the one who made all of these offerings. I'm the one who paid for all of this food. The beggar in the alleyway did nothing. And then the Buddha said to the king, you came to this whole event with large amounts of pride, so your virtue has actually lessened. And the beggar in the alley had pure motivation and rejoiced in the merit that you created. And this is why I dedicated all the virtue that was created to him and not you. So it's very beneficial to do, to rejoice. So the fifth is requesting. The requesting is requesting the wheel of Dharma to be turned. So this is what it's referring to. It's asking the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to turn the wheel of Dharma, which is synonymous with teach the Dharma. Turn the wheel, teach the Dharma. So we should imagine that when we ask the Buddha to please teach us the Dharma, that the Buddha accepts and asserts that, yes, I will teach you. So we imagine that when we're doing this particular limb of requesting, that there is a response from the Buddha, and the response is, yes, I will teach. And it's because the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have clairvoyance and omniscience that this actually works. By making these requests in future lives, we will be able to become the students of these great beings because they hear our requests because of their clairvoyance or omniscience.
샤차와다 최지 샤바다 지수이랑
냐나레마다와
냐갈레마다 추구고스 냐갈레마다 소왔다 바스 두바데 냐갈레마다 소왔다 비올라 드레스로와 더 가르르스나 아니 산지데네 고냐갈데비 수마데 다가랑 쇼로지스 아니 가서 달리 라마 달라마 자와제부줄레 아니 고냐갈레마데 쇼로지스 what 냐갈레마다 소왔다 바스
니차 라
오야
칙라. Got it.
Okay.
So the sixth of the seven limb prayer is the prayer of entreating or begging. And this is begging or entreating the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, teachers and so forth, our root teachers and so forth, to not leave this world and to not pass into nirvana. So this is a request, or actually it's stronger than request. That's why we call it retreating or begging, which is just begging them not to leave us. And then the last limb is the limb of dedication, because any virtue that we engage in must be coupled with a proper dedication if it is to stay with us. So it's even if we engage in a very small amount of virtue, if it's dedicated to all sentient beings becoming enlightened or becoming complete Buddhas, then even the smallest amount of virtue that is dedicated properly will increase in power or increase in potential. So it's important for us to make a proper dedication to make the virtue that we've engaged in, however small it is, more powerful.
Chutibaji Jasuna Sana, Jasuma Gamba the Segamaris, Sanji Sumbaris, Cheta Jasuchuna Chusitere, and Jasuma Gamba the Temezi, the Shanchu Yang Gawaya, Shanchu Matuba Temezi, Sanji the Sumbaris.
It's been stated by Buddha that a properly dedicated virtue will stay with us until we achieve Buddhahood. It's stated in scripture that any virtue that's been engaged in, that's been properly dedicated, will not leave until one gains the final goal or complete enlightenment. Just like one drop of water in the ocean is not extinguished until the entire ocean is extinguished.
Gawatin Huamajiva in a Gawatin Natu Kalaki Dombadabaris, Kalasugor, potatoes over. Domatil Rebijima Tagmaras, banana, Domajison till banana, Rebichi Tagars, then Domat Mebarin, Yan Sabajomuris, what the Dabis is. No could Rebichi Sasa, then the cook on was. What the Huamajina go out than Dabis is. Huajiva ina and Abbot tree roa. Abbot tree like in the Devada.
So, properly dedicated virtue is unlike a banana tree. A banana tree produces its bananas and then it perishes. There's no longer can produce any fruit. But the properly dedicated virtue is likened to an apple tree, because an apple tree year after year produces fruit and does not die off after one season of production. So this is why properly dedicated virtue is compared to an apple tree and dissimilar from a banana tree.
Oje ta Jesu Yerang Tang, Huani Bute, Gawapi Yalaris, Jesu Yerang Tang, Huaya Bajevaina, Susu Gawatu de Amon Gozares.
Jesu Yerang Tang Hua.
Huani.
Okay. So the rejoicing and dedication is called expanding virtue, or expanding a limb. And what that means is that it creates more and more and more. So this is why it's called the expanding limb.
Tashatewa, Chobambiwa, Atene Chugukua, Yangalimanda, Swataba, Otosuk, two Sabiunaris, two Saba, Mombutu Mombusabi.
So the limb of prostration or homage, the limb of offering, the limb of requesting, and the limb of entreating fall into the category of limb of accumulation, for accumulating things, merit. And then the limb of confession refers to, obviously, the limb of confession, the limb of acknowledgement. So we can find even in the great treatise on the stages, of the path to enlightenment, which is really an explanation of this root text, the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, we can find that it states that there are three. The seven limbs can be divided into three: the limb of expansion, the limb of confession, and the limb of accumulation. So it can be divided into three. Zotsang. So we've arrived at, hold on. Drupa, Dumba. Drupa, Dumba.
Dumba reba, Zusan Teko Lasso Bajidua. Zusan Teko. Zusan Teko Lasso Dang, Chuden Dang Shu Ne, Matu Dubu Mobuta.
Okay.
That's
so we've arrived at number 7. Facing paintings, statues, and so forth of the completely enlightened one, reliquaries, and the excellent teaching, offer flowers, incense, and whatever you have. So here we've arrived at the part that is speaking about the 7-limb prayer.
아니 줘봐 상사 시탄당 상제 고도서 가 야부샤스 어디서 뭐 말해 조선 제고 라소 다스 최대 당 주권수네 다 최대 당 아니 대답이 네 도슬 응원수네 아니 모두 비야요는다 네 셰라당 수자의 셰라당 가르비야요는 어디 조비워레스 모두 두비 뭐보다 전주바이 쳐봐샤스 모두 두비 모두 비도난다 아니 가르비도나 소속 연수기 쳐봐야 비워레스
맞아요.
genjurubai chobashas junsoji can so gurba
Yes.
can abring
Akusa. So here it says facing paintings, statues, and so forth of the completely enlightened one. And here this refers to statues that are objects which represent the Buddha, such as the statues here on the altar, or tankas, which are religious paintings, paintings of the Buddha. So here, this is what is meant by facing paintings and statues and so forth. It refers to paintings and statues which are images of the Buddha. Reliquaries, here it's stupas. So people might be more familiar with the word stupa. The English translation has used this word that I can't pronounce very well, reliquaries. Relics, okay. So that it's stupa it's in the Tibetan. It says stupas, and the excellent teaching. And then it says offer flowers, incense, whatever you have. The meaning of this is whatever you have to offer, whatever you can offer, whether it's food or drinks or flowers or incense, make the offerings of these things to the holy objects of enlightenment. So this is the meaning of this particular stanza.
또 생기 초반비와 되시라 계시부터 생기 상을동 초반비와
And it's very important to make offerings with our mind, to think of offerings and make mental offerings.
어제 다때는 군상쉐를 송바이 초반나바 듄다 장스 군상쉐를 송바이 송도 데레 장쉐만랑 군상쉐를 송바이 초반나바 듄다 장스 그전쇼를 좀 봐. 장쇼만 상제근도 장쇼만 세줘로. 다른 가서 잡아 봐야 전도해야지도 어딘도도 못 보여래. 대인 곳들 상연랜도요. 장쇼는 좀 봐. 나중에 연락도 받듯이 아버지스. 샤세와 다기 주사로 어들에 연락도 받듯 연락도 받듯이 아버지 워르스.
So here it says, with the 7-part offering from the Prayer of Noble Conduct. The Prayer of Noble Conduct is a very large text, and at the beginning of that text there is a 7-limb prayer. So this is what Atisha is referring to here, with the thought never to turn back till you gain ultimate enlightenment. So here this refers to the 7-limb prayer, and the 7-limb prayer specifically at the beginning of the Prayer of Noble Conduct.
어제 대연라 뒤바도 어디 인사레스 조아 드레스 조아 뭐지 조송고는 조아 차버렸다 면세 조아도 어디 연라 뒤바드레스.
So here this refers to the accumulations necessary for the aspirational mind. So here we've gone over sections that refer to that first section of the 3 spoken of before of accumulation. Yep. So maybe today, Rinpoche said we'll have a shorter class because maybe people are busy. We have a holiday tomorrow and so forth. So maybe today's class will be a little shorter.
So we're going
to slowly get into the section which goes more over aspiration and refuge and various other things as we go slowly through this text.
아니 천디 부분 도바이나요. 생 저와시말만 도온도 네 거와게 사변데 저와시말만 도네 처럼 먹을래 수수 집이용아 사담이 대상도야 타발도야 상지에 고바치 용거레스.
So if we're able, when we go home, to think about these things and engage in an analysis and familiarize our minds with these topics, then we'll be able to produce more and more seeds within our mental continuum of virtue that will always produce happiness, produce rebirth in the human's realm, produce rebirth into the demigods and God's realm. So if we engage in these practices and we engage in positive activities, when we discard rather, these aggregates at the time of death and we move on to our next life, at that point in time we will be able to achieve rebirth into the higher realms. So it moves beyond this life, and this is what we should think about so that we're able to achieve fortunate results in the future. So in this life and in future lives, things will become better. So this is why it is beneficial.
Yeah.
Chua dan lenja, huan gariga. Huan tambo.
Tambo de shino marwa. An dunta jemi samen kasa ngasu zanyamal ngasu pari rowa. Pari teaching de ngasu ngui male rujis. Teaching yung kansul.
So we're going to have a party next week after the teaching in celebration of Rinpoche's and the Dalai Lama's birthday. And it's not necessary to pay any money for the party, for the food or anything.
Oh, yeah.
Rinpoche wants to make it clear that he doesn't want people to pay for the party.
And just family,
everyone please come. Center members, people who come to the center, your families, everyone is invited.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So
we're going to do the dedications and so forth. So we end with the concluding mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient living beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate it to virtue. In particular, the essential teachings of Enlightenment shine forever. Send forth this small Guru Ratna Mandala Gam Niratayami. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Jambel Bawu Jeda Jenwadang Ondu Zambo Deyan Dejinte Deda Kunji Jesu Daloje Gewa Dida Tanche Ratungo Dusum Jebe Nyawa Tanche Ni Ngowa Ganla Chotu Ngapade Dajen Gewe Tsawa Dekunjang Sambo Jujiratu Ngowani. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, the source of all happiness and help for beings, Tenzin Gyatso, Chenrezig in person, may his life be secure for hundreds of kalpas. Ngari rawe ngowe shinyam ni mendan dewa malun jongwe ne Chenrezig wang tenzin yatso yi jambe zine mardu jen yon yi. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend of wisdom and perseverance. Lo zun zambo yun jen nang ala yun rin jaman zebe gewe lo non doge den man zin jema en surwanda rin jen the light of your wisdom dispels the darkness obscuring the five scriptures. You joyously uphold the sublime teachings of Sutra and Tantra through the three doors. Through constantly applied perseverance, you have perfected learning and reflection. May Venerable Geshe Lharampa remain for a long time. Lord, Da